Welcome everyone to Ask an Educator Live. Tonight our topic is buckthorn removal and healthy hedges. We will get started in just a moment as folks join the webinar and possibly our Facebook live stream. Welcome everyone, thank you for joining us. This is Ask an Educator Live. The topic tonight is buckthorn removal and healthy hedges. Our panelists are excited to answer your questions tonight in just a few moments. Once again, welcome to Ask an Educator Live. Tonight's topic is buckthorn removal and healthy hedges. Tonight we have two panelists on the line. We have Allison Frederick, Assistant Public Affairs Manager for Lake County Forest Preserves. We have Matt Ueltzen, Restoration Ecologist II, and we're excited to hear their expertise on all things buckthorn and some good alternatives. So thanks for joining us tonight. All right, so it looks like we'll get started. Before we dive into our Q&A, and even before we meet our panelists, we're gonna go through just a few housekeeping tips for those of you who are joining us, either on Zoom or on Facebook. So attendees can view and participate in two different ways. You may be viewing tonight's event in the Zoom webinar audience or watching the Facebook live stream. So let's start with those webinar logistics. If you are in the Zoom webinar, we will not be able to see your video or hear you. The way you can interact is through the Q&A and chat features. If you would like to ask our panelists a question, you can submit it through the Q&A once. Feel free to submit multiple questions too, if you'd like. We will try to answer as many questions as time allows. Now, there's also a chat feature in the webinar. The chat should only be used if you need to communicate with the host for some reason, not to ask questions. Also, we may use your first names. However, you can submit a question anonymously through the webinar Q&A if preferred. If you are viewing on the live stream on Facebook, feel free to submit your questions in the comment section of the stream. And Brett Pito, who's on the line, will direct the questions to the webinar side as time allows. And of course, for all attendees, do not worry if we don't get to your question. You can always email us at askaneducator@lcfpd.org. And of course, we're going to give you an even more specific email address to send your buckthorn related questions to as well. And I'll put that in the chat. So without further ado, let's meet the panelists. We have Allison Frederick, Assistant Public Affairs Manager with the Lake County Forest Preserves, and Matt Ueltzen, Restoration Ecologist II, also with the Lake County Forest Preserves. Welcome both of you tonight, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us. We're very excited to be here. We did a similar program just a couple weeks ago called Healthy Hedges. So watch for future upcoming opportunities as well. As Anissa so kindly introduced me, I am Allison Frederick, Assistant Public Affairs Manager of the district, and I get to tell really fun stories and help answer your questions. I've talked to a lot of you, hopefully over the years, at various programs, presentations, and maybe even a restoration workday or two. So I work closely with Natural Resources Department to get the word out on all the projects they're doing and their major initiatives. And this particular combo happened about 5 years back, Matt, I think you can agree, and we've been working together ever since. So Matt's the on the ground guy, so why don't you tell us more about you?
Thanks, Allison, and welcome everybody and good evening. Again, my name is Matt Ueltzen. I'm a restoration ecologist here with the district. I've worked at the district for about 20 years and worked on various projects, habitat restoration related, from this buckthorn eradication initiative to various wetland restoration projects, also the Southern Des Plaines Oak Ecosystem or Oak Woodland Restoration Project that has gone on over the past few years in our southern preserves. And also I manage the district's reforestation program. So thank you everybody for coming tonight.
Thank you, Allison and Matt. So before we dive into our Q&A tonight, I think you have some great background information you wanted to share with us. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen if you wanted to get your information set up.
Sounds good. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we've been doing this before, so I'll go ahead and share just a few slides. We know what some of your questions may be, just based on what we've heard in the past. And just give it a moment here. It's a little slow to load. Well, thought I chose the specific one, but let's try it this way. All right, Matt, give me a thumbs up. Good? All right. So we figured we would start with just a little bit of background about buckthorn, why we're here tonight. We don't want to just jump into the goods about how to get rid of it without telling you the why first. So why is it here? Settlers brought it to North America along with them. As they traveled here from Europe, they brought along a little bit of home by way of a hedge. They knew that it was a great hedgerow back home. Like so many of us, when we move, we just, we want to bring a little piece of home with us. So that's likely what happened here. It was planted in various areas, mostly along the East Coast. And by the 1900s, it became naturalized in our native woodlands and forests here. At that point, or after, it became quickly spread across the northeastern United States, all the way to the Midwest where we are, and up into provinces of Canada, very far north. We've also, along the way, over all those years, also have been disturbing the land quite a bit, building all the things humans build. And these species just have an affinity for disturbed places. So you chop up the soil or things change and they just move right in and do very well in those spots. So just a little bit of background to tell you how it got here, how it, how it's spreading, and then, how bad has it gotten since then? So this is 2010 data, I'll start by saying, so these numbers are unfortunately most likely higher. This is from research to the Morton Arboretum and U.S. Forest Service that did a tree survey, essentially the entire Chicago region. And from that, we all learned that Lake County is the most impacted county in the region in terms of buckthorn infestations. 40, but at this point it was 40.99% of all trees in Lake County are European buckthorn. So, and even if you look down there on the list, green ash, white spruce, we don't really have any natives in that list either. So it's quite clearly an issue. It's not an issue just here in Lake County. It's all through the Chicago region. So fortunately, we have teamed up with partners to help get rid of this thing. So what is buckthorn? Matt, can you tell us a bit more so people know if they have it in their backyard for certain?
Sure. So when we talk about buckthorn, there's two species that are found here in Lake County that are invasive and exotic and are the real problems. We have common buckthorn, or European buckthorn, which is Rhamnus cathartica, and we have another species called glossy buckthorn, which is Pharyngula alnus. These are kind of based on semantics, kind of a tall shrub or a small tree, depending on how you look at it. They're about 25 feet tall. They have kind of a loose crown. They're really kind of scraggly looking with, branches going sideways and up and down and all over and kind of intertwining with each other. And they're kind of like I said, just have a very scraggly looking appearance to them. They have multiple stems a lot of times, and they're one kind of interesting feature about them is that they're dioecious, meaning that they're separate male and female plants. So only the female plants produce the berries and the seeds. The males just produce flowers. So some identification tips and photos here. You can kind of see what a typical infestation looks like on that upper left-hand corner, there's just kind of everything growing all on top of each other. It forms a very thick hedge, very dense area that's very difficult to walk through or to even see through. What you see in that center picture is the leaf pattern. What European buckthorn, I'll be focusing mostly on European buckthorn for this talk. We have both glossy and European buckthorn in Lake County, but the glossy buckthorn is really found in more wetlands or wetter places and habitats like that. So what most people see in their backyards or certainly along roadsides, and what's the most common species in Lake County is this European buckthorn. So that's what we're showing on the screen now. Again, the center photo is the leaf pattern. European buckthorn has what's called a sub-opposite pattern, meaning that some points of the stem, the leaves come off the stem at the same place on both sides. And other places on the stem, you'll see they're alternating where one leaf comes off one side and then a little further down the stem, another leaf comes off the other side. The berries that you see in the upper right-hand corner form in late August, early September. So we're seeing them on the plants right now. They're that dark purple black color, very small, about 1/4 of an inch diameter. Again, they're very prolific. There's about 3 to 4 seeds in each one of those berries. The flowers that you see there are very kind of inconspicuous. The flowers somewhat early in the spring. Most people never see the flowers because they're just kind of this drab greenish yellow color that blends in with the other vegetation around. It kind of mimics the same color as the leaves of buckthorn, so most people never even see the flowers. What you see on the bottom right-hand side is the twig, or the winter twig. You see the buds there and the thorn that's sticking out of the center. This is the reason why it's called buckthorn. It has that thorn, if you will, although it's not a true thorn like you'd find on a rose bush. But again, they're very prevalent, and they're not always easy to see, but again, if you walk through a buckthorn thicket, they'll find you. And then the very bottom, you see the different bark patterns that can be exhibited on buckthorn. The far left-hand side is a very young stem. It has lots of those little white lenticels and dots on it, and as the tree grows, those kind of open up and spread and give the bark a very peely or flaky appearance to it. Go ahead.
So this time of year is a great time to scan and check not just your backyard landscapes, but local natural areas and even roadways. That infestation on the last slide is just an example of your common roadway where it's just kind of been buzzed along the edge. But in your own backyard, as the native trees, as our oaks and hickories and maples turn all their beautiful colors of gold and russet browns, buckthorn does not. It stays green like this. So as you drive around in your fall Lake County landscapes, just take a look, especially end of October into November. If you're still seeing green leaves like this, especially in dense clusters, you're probably looking at something invasive, and just knowing what we know, it's probably buckthorn, or at least partly buckthorn. There's some other invasive shrubs like honeysuckle that will look like this, but you'll see them together with buckthorn commonly too. So we tell you this because it's a great time to plan for winter removal efforts. As you look, if you're not too keen with identification skills, then take a look. If you're noticing this in your backyard, take a look at the green, and then remember those characteristics Matt mentioned, and that will help you identify. And then you can mark this patch if you have a lot of land or a little. Just kind of flag these trees because winter is the best time to clear, so you can kind of be ready. And then of course, we have to tell you what we would love you to plant in its place. Of course, some people love the openness it brings, but some people want privacy screenings back in there for whatever reason. They want something in its place. So scan this time of year for maybe if you have buckthorn, and if it's back there, then cut it down this winter, and then start thinking about possible native shrub replacements. So we have this great resource. Anissa will share it in the chat box here in a little bit. And we have this available online. It's just alternatives. We've worked with a lot of regional partners who, like I said, are doing much of the same thing we are. And so I won't spend much time on this, but we're just starting to build resources to help people say goodbye to buckthorn, but maybe get some color back in their yard. Those tiny little green flowers and bright green leaves aren't what we all love. I personally love some red leaves and maybe some pretty conspicuous flowers in early spring. So Healthy Hedges Guide is a great way to get started. I don't know, Anissa, what do you think? Should I stop share and then see how's the Q&A looking?
Well, we definitely have some people with questions waiting in the wings, so we can get started with that and then maybe share some other resources as they relate. Does that sound good? Great. Okay, let's do that. So let's get into our Q&A session. I'm just going to review a few things before we dive in, and I'm going to just bring up our housekeeping tips screen here. So we just met our panelists. And now, of course, it's Q&A time. So just a few friendly reminders, especially if you just joined us, be sure to submit your questions for the panelists in the Q&A box only. Please do not use the chat unless you would like to potentially reach the host or if you're having any issues with the webinar. And also, please do not submit your question more than once. Even if you're really itching to get it answered, we will be sure to try to get as many as we can answered. And if we cannot, we have shared those email addresses that you can send your questions to as well, which we'll share again at the end of the program. So let's get started. Matt and Allison, you ready? Awesome. Okay, so let's start with a question from Beverly. Beverly asks, the previous owners of my house actually planted buckthorn. While I am cutting it down, it keeps coming back. How do I get rid of it for good?
Well, I'll get the ball started, I guess. One of the things that is a characteristic of buckthorn, unfortunately, is that it is very persistent and it doesn't go away easily or doesn't go away just by cutting it. We do in the forest preserve, and what other partners and other people are doing around the region is applying herbicide to those plants, to the cut stumps after we're cutting the plants down. So there's several different options for herbicide. Most commonly in the winter, we're using an herbicide with an active ingredient called triclopyr. It's sold under the trade names of Garlon. That's the kind of the brand name, but there's lots of other generic brands and other products that have triclopyr in it. So using products that have triclopyr would be my best recommendation for you.
And where can someone get a product like that?
If you want it in a larger jug and a concentrate, it's available from online retailers. It's also available from farm and garden center supply stores like a Conserve FS or some of the bigger garden centers. Even the local, like a Home Depot or Lowe's, those type of places or garden centers, smaller garden centers, usually have some sort of product that has triclopyr in it. I will caution you that the concentrations that we're using are much higher than some of what is found in the ready-to-use formulations that you see on the shelf. So if it's less than 1% triclopyr, you may not get the effectiveness that you're looking for. You need a higher percentage of that active ingredient in the product.
That buckthorn is sure stubborn. So we have another question from a viewer on our webinar side. This is from Douglas. They are asking, earlier this month, I walked around Greenbelt Forest Preserve. There was a lot of buckthorn along that trail. How does the Forest Preserve manage that much buckthorn? Do you just remove it or do you replant it with something else at the same time?
Let us count the ways, right, Matt? Restoration workdays are very active at Greenbelt Forest Preserve, so I know there are active volunteer groups. So if you're a frequent visitor of Greenbelt, you might consider joining the fun there and learning more that way. We also contract with different companies or use crews of our own to cut large areas down. And then it just depends on the management goals of that location. But we may or may not plant or seed following that. Matt, maybe you can tell them specifically what's up at Greenbelt this year in terms of reforestation.
There's no reforestation plans at Greenbelt for this year, but typically after we do a clearing, since we're using herbicides, we usually wait at least a year before we would do any reforestation planting. Seeding and other prairie stuff, seedings might happen more frequently or more closer to the time of the removal, but it's usually about a year after we remove the buckthorn. So I will also add to that and say that in the past, the Forest Preserve was very focused on buckthorn within the preserves. And I think what we've come to realize over the last couple of years is that we can't just simply look internally. And that's part of the reason why we have this buckthorn campaign and this initiative, is that we're trying to reach out to our neighbors, reach out to a larger landscape, to all of the neighbors, and have all of Lake County be involved in this fight with us, because the birds that are eating the berries are not paying attention to political boundaries or property lines. So if we control buckthorn on our property, but our neighbors aren't, then we're constantly going to be reinfested and reinvaded with that buckthorn. So we're really trying to get the word out about how bad this pest is in Lake County and throughout our region, and try to encourage and engage everyone in this fight along with us.
So we have a viewer that is curious about the compound you had mentioned in regards to choosing your herbicide. Can you spell that, or can you put it in the chat, the name TR, and that's as far as they got.
Should we pull up the slide?
Sure.
You want the simple version or the long version, Matt?
We can do the simple version to start with.
Okay, we'll start there. Hold on.
So the chemical that we use is, again, the trade name that's sold under is Garlon, but the active ingredient that you find in that is triclopyr, which is seen on the screen there is TRICLOPYR. It's found in lots of products, but Garlon is the kind of the name brand and the first one that developed this chemical. We also at times use glyphosate, or what the active ingredient in Roundup. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be as effective as the Garlon or the triclopyr, and we have to use it at much higher concentrations. And unfortunately, that product you can't mix; it has to be mixed with water. So in the winter time, that's not really a good option for us, because if we put that in a sprayer, it would freeze up on us while we're out there trying to work.
So we have a connected question here. Douglas is also asking if it's safe for homeowners to apply that herbicide. In the past, I was told that only licensed companies were allowed to use buckthorn-capable herbicides.
No, Garlon and the other products that I've talked about so far are all general use herbicide, meaning that they're available to anyone in the general public. And again, they're sold online. They're sold in garden centers and other type of stores that are general retail stores. So they're accessible to the general public.
You do just want to make sure you're always reading and following the labels, because there'll be different rates and solutions and mixes, and how big is the area? Are you applying with a sponge? Are you applying to a cut stump? Is it a foliar application? So just be sure whatever product you buy, that's a legal document. So just be very careful of label instructions.
Absolutely. There's many different products and different formulations and different concentrations of the active ingredient in each product. So again, the solution that we're using of triclopyr on our cut stumps is about I want to say a 15% solution of active ingredient, and I've seen in stores triclopyr that's 0.8%, so significantly lower than what would be effective or what we would recommend for buckthorn.
I'll go back to this slide too, Matt, just to show them that the cambium layer, and maybe you can describe
Sure.
why it's blue.
Yeah, So everything that we spray, we put in a dye, or the oil that it's mixed in is colored so that we can see which stumps we've hit. So that way we're not applying herbicide to the stump more than once and needlessly. And the reason why you see kind of the blue ring around it is that that's the only living part of the tree. So that's where all the water and the nutrients are being translocated through the plant. So if we can apply the herbicide just to that outer ring, we can effectively kill the plant. We don't have to apply herbicide across the whole area or across the whole stump. So it really can cut down on your herbicide use and a lot of the off-target or potential off-target damage from spraying more of a broadcast application.
We have a lot of questions rolling in about herbicide. Jim is asking, is Garlon safe around bees?
I'm sorry, around what?
Bees, B-E-E-S.
I believe so. Again, it would be on the label and some of the other MSDS, which is a material safe to data sheet. If you look up the whatever various products, it should have some statement on there about bees, because obviously that's important for our agriculture, for beekeeping, and other enthusiasts for that. I want to say most of the chemicals will have a statement on there about whether it's safe for bees or if there's what kind of toxicity there might be to bees. And I don't have it in front of me open right now, but I believe that everything that we use has a very low or no toxicity for bees.
And on the same note of herbicide, Karen wants to know when the best time is to apply. Is it when the buckthorn is dormant?
We do all of our buckthorn management, or not all of it, we do the majority of our buckthorn management in the winter time. So we're utilizing frozen ground conditions to get into a site, cut the buckthorn, or burn it or chip it or remove it in some fashion, and then we're herbiciding the stumps that same day that we're cutting them. Because we're doing it in the winter, we're using that Garlon or Triclopyr 4 formulation in a basil oil, which is just like another carrier. Instead of mixing it with water, we're mixing it with this basil oil carrier, which is also available in most garden centers and other supply stores. It's becoming a lot more common in those places. But again, it doesn't freeze, so we can use it in the winter time, and we're able to apply immediately after cutting.
It's also a good time because if you have any plants growing around, if it's not a complete thicket of buckthorn and there are plants you want to protect in the area, then the ground is frozen, other plants nearby are dormant. So with all the dragging of brush and in and out with heavier boots in the winter, that makes it, that's kind of a bonus.
And so another question about the Triclopyr, Susan and Grant are asking, is there a specific purple dye you add when mixing with oil, or is it just food coloring?
The oil that you purchase usually comes with the dye or in it already, or it's colored in some fashion. But there are dye packets and commercial dye available for herbicide spray solutions that you can purchase as well.
So it looks like there's a lot of folks interested in getting to work right away. Susan and Grant are also asking, is there a planned date for when restoration workdays with volunteers for buckthorn removal will be resuming?
I don't know about obviously large groups are restricted. I know that individually stewards have been out there with family groups. I kind of wear two hats. I'm a steward out at Fox River, and we got updated protocol in terms of brush pile burning and getting back to that sort of thing. But I don't know if work days are a go. Matt, do you?
I'm not sure if those are happening yet, unfortunately. I think it's really just the smaller stewardship activities that are with our existing stewards. I don't know if we're taking on any new larger just corporate groups or other groups right now, unfortunately. We can check on that though.
And on that note, I think this already tied in with a previous answer, but this person is asking if buckthorn can be removed year round. I know you mentioned that you typically treat it in the winter. And is there a most effective season for removal? They are saying their township picks up brush weekly, April through November. Would leaf cuttings at the curb for a week be a problem in terms of spread?
Any time is a good time to remove buckthorn as far as I'm concerned. Again, we do it in the winter because that's the time that's most convenient for us, and to do it in a larger scale that we typically need to do it at. But smaller scale, if it's single trees or a home landscape, I would encourage you to think about removing buckthorn and managing buckthorn any time of the year. It might affect what herbicide you use, what would be most appropriate for that time. Again, we're using the triclopyr 4 in the winter, but in the summer or growing season, we would switch to a triclopyr 3, which is just a similar active ingredient, just a slightly different formulation that is less volatile, so it doesn't evaporate and potentially damage other plants around it. But there's definitely options for herbicide use any time of the year.
So we can get to work. All right, there's another question from a webinar attendee. This person is asking about some of the pictures you showed initially of buckthorn trees. He is concerned that he's pulling the wrong thing when he's pulling small trees. Is there a picture you have of maybe a younger or infant tree so he can make sure he is not pulling the wrong thing?
Well, I have some examples that I just cut today. If you're interested, if I can switch to speaker view, maybe I can hold them up and see if that gives a little bit better of an example than the photos.
Go for it, Matt.
Sure. So this is a common or European buckthorn. Again, very round, egg-shaped leaves. All have a point at the tip. You can see on the leaves that the veins at the top are very impressed into the leaf. They stick into it, and what you see on the end of the twig is that point. That's the thorn or that aborted twig that has become a thorn on the branch. The best diagnostic I have found for trees or for identifying buckthorn as compared to other trees is if you find a small stick, the inner bark is yellowish orange in color. So no other trees or shrubs in our area exhibit that. So if you're really curious about it, if you just take your knife or saw, whatever you're using to cut the buckthorn, if you peel that outer bark away, you'll see that very clear, very bright orange, yellowish color. That's very diagnostic for buckthorn. Again, no other trees in our area have that.
That's a really good tip. So I know that we're going to probably dive into this a little bit more, but Dave is asking, what is a good plant to plant in replace of buckthorn? And are these plants easily accessible? And we may be able to maybe mention an upcoming event as well.
Sounds like good timing. There are boatloads of things that you can put in place of buckthorn. It just depends on what you want to do with your yard. If you want to bring in butterflies and birds in particular, do you want a privacy screen? Do you want a mix of high and low? How much space do you have? So there's a lot that goes into it, but there are a lot of just common native species that are pretty good in many, in your average landscape. We do have currently going an Oaktober tree sale. It's a tree and shrub sale. They're all native species. I think we might be out of shrubs already. Matt, do you know our count? But there are plenty of oaks and larger trees available, right?
I think most of those are going quick too. So again, the sale has been going on for about a month or so now. So unfortunately, many of the options that we did have are probably sold out, but I would encourage you to check. We do have a lot of smaller 1 gallon oak trees that are available still for sure.
It ends tomorrow. So sales end tomorrow because pickup is on Sunday, October 4th at Ryerson. This is the second year we've done it in a row. It's online pre-order this year just because of less programming and less crowds. So watch for it again this year if you miss it. We also host every year on Mother's Day weekends. We host a native plant sale, and that's beyond just trees and shrubs. You can get grasses and sedges and forbs and all of the different wonderful milkweeds to bring in monarchs and other pollinators. So I guess maybe if someone had a particular yard they wanted to throw at us, like I've got a super sunny spot, I love a monarch or whatever, you know, how do I bring in the catbirds? Maybe we could help a bit more. But in the meantime, you can reach all of us, even Brett Pito, who's hiding behind the scenes in Facebook. We should ask him how he is over there. It will email sent to healthyhedges@lcfpd.org will come directly to Matt, Brett, and myself. So if you have a specific question or even a photo of your yard, or I forget who asked, maybe it was Jem who asked, might be cutting down the wrong thing, just send us a picture to that email address, and that's why we set it up, to help with more specific yard questions. But yeah, the Healthy Hedges poster that I showed earlier has a mix all the way down from the sedge ground layer up to the tall trees. But if you want something that kind of quickly grows in and does really well around here, hazelnut shrubs or the American filbert is a great one. I see that in lots of landscaping. High, dry, partly sunny, partly shady, blasted with sun, so it seems to do pretty well. And there are just a number of species like that. Nannyberry, viburnums, dogwoods, those are all going to be about the same size, those understory kind of small tree, large shrub type of size. So if you kind of want this privacy screen that was there, that's gone after buckthorn removal, just maybe stick to that category. But we always recommend a mix of forbs and grasses to just bring the most benefit back to the land. All those great services Mother Nature can provide for us, the more diversity in your yard, the better.
And I'll add to the species that Allison mentioned, if there are specific privacy concerns or trying to replace buckthorn with something that offers some of those same benefits, wild plum and also hawthorns do grow very dense and very thick, and kind of make a good replacement for that privacy screening if that's really the desire, or if that's the barrier for you to remove buckthorn. There are native plants that can be a replacement to buckthorn that offer that same privacy or that density of vegetation. And the upside of those is that they produce great fall color. They have great beautiful floral displays, and they produce fruit that's edible to humans as well as wildlife, and can attract other wildlife and birds to your yard too. That it's just adds a lot more interest to your yard than simply a green buckthorn.
So I'm going to pause our Q&A just for a moment because we need to check in with our audience. We always collect our attendee numbers, but I know with virtual programs, sometimes there's more than one person viewing on your device. So this is 100% anonymous, but for our webinar viewers, I'm going to launch a poll here really quick. If you can please just let us know if there's more than one person on your device at the moment, just so we can get a better idea of how many folks are tuning in tonight. That would be greatly appreciated. So I'll give everyone about 30 seconds or so. And I think Brett might put a question out on Facebook as well. So for our Facebook viewers, they can also let us know who is viewing, how many of you are viewing. And I'm gonna end the poll in about 10 more seconds. In the meantime, there's a whole bunch of great questions lining up in the queue. So Matt and Allison, get ready. I see you got your drink of water, so.
Maybe you need another.
And then I'll also be checking in with Brett on the Facebook end. I think it was a little bit quieter earlier, but now things are moving a little more. All right, so I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you all for participating. Okay, so maybe we'll grab one more question for our webinar side, and then I'll check in with Brett. So we have several questions about getting equipment for cutting and herbiciding. One from Laura. and also Judy as well. So any pointers for where they can get the items to do the clearing? I think we talked a little bit more about the herbicide materials.
Sure. I'm sorry, do you want more information about herbicide materials or just other general cutting materials? Was that the question?
Apologies, I think they were asking equipment for cutting and herbiciding.
Okay. If it's smaller stems, like maybe your thumb diameter or so, there's loppers that are available in most garden centers that that work really well, very effective at smaller sizes. Once you get above that, you probably have to switch to kind of a saw, a hand saw, or some sort that usually works pretty well. That's very effective and easy to use for plants that are about 2 to 3 inches. Once you get above that, you're probably dealing with a larger plant that you need to think about some sort of mechanical equipment, like finding a chainsaw or something bigger, or think about hiring a contractor to do that work. In terms of herbicide equipment, we talked about herbicide being available a lot more frequently in more areas now, but in terms of the equipment that we use, is we're using just a simple backpack sprayer and putting that herbicide solution into that sprayer. And then, unfortunately, I don't have it with me today, but what we do is put a sponge on the tip of the spray nozzle and zip tie that on there, and put some rags over top of that and zip tie those on as well. So it's kind of this durable sponge tip to the end of the herbicide sprayer, so that you can, when you squeeze the trigger of the herbicide wand, it'll put the herbicide into that sponge. It won't spray it everywhere, and then you can literally just dab it on the cut stumps that you have. And the sprayers are pretty universal, found at most garden centers or hardware stores.
And personal protective equipment is important too. Matt mentioned the false thorns. They're so nasty. I have this weird little scar on one of my thighs. I swear it's from a buckthorn thorn. You do that snap on the knee bit. And I had a little thorn in there for a while, and now it's just a weird little scar. So they're pretty vicious. So definitely some nice sturdy work gloves. Protect your eyes if you don't already wear glasses. I'm talking the edges here, because really, once you really get dragging it, branches are flying everywhere. Nice sturdy pants, so if you are snapping them or dragging them, you can kind of bundle it up that way. So do protect your skin with this plant also.
Especially if you're using a chainsaw, there's products called chainsaw chaps that are cut proof for a chainsaw. If you happen to nick yourself, it would stop the saw immediately before it would go cut through the chaps and into your pants or your leg. So think about that if you're interested in using a chainsaw.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who are asking about the email address, that was posted in the chat. We'll also post a few other links and addresses too that Allison and Matt had discussed, and we'll be sure to add those in at the end if you didn't catch the chat earlier. So I'm going to check in with Brett over on the Facebook end. Hey, Brett, how's it going over there?
Pretty good. Thanks, Anissa. We do have a question from one user who's saying, how might we work with an HOA that refuses to cut buckthorn? Ours insists that the buckthorn thicket is a natural area and will not listen to our call for action.
That's a tough one. Privacy screening and just the pseudo benefits that people perceive from buckthorn is a real thing, and unfortunately, I would take issue with calling that a natural area. If it's that infested, it's probably not a natural area at all. It's just a desert that happens to have buckthorn in it, unfortunately. So it's a tough call, but I would say if you're in an HOA, you are an owner of that common property along with everyone else in that HOA. So hopefully there's a kind of a changing of the guard and more people becoming aware of buckthorn and how negative it impacts our natural areas in forest preserves and other places, and how it's spreading and so persistent. So hopefully there's some changing of ideas and understanding of that. And I would just say start small and keep keep working with your group and your HOA board and trying to garner some some collective efforts there to remove it.
And we offer free presentations for groups. So if the HOA is interested or willing, we can certainly come and speak to groups, and we can cater it to specific questions. We can make it a Q&A like this. We're very flexible, but we do kind of have a quote canned presentation that's ready to just kind of talk more in depth about just the impacts of this, and that really makes a difference for home values. So we can kind of speak that language, and Matt's working really hard. We have a pilot project for Buckthorn surrounding Middle Fork Savannah Forest Reserve that's in Lake Forest, and Matt over the last 5 years at least has really been working across all those property boundaries and directly with some HOAs. So we know it can be done. It's just a matter of finding out kind of what is the barrier to getting rid of this thing, and just kind of meeting them at that point. So it is possible, and the more you spread the word of what you've learned tonight and how to get rid of it, the better off we all will be. And true, it's not an overnight thing. We know what we're asking when we say eradicate buckthorn, because it lives in the seed bank for years. And so HOAs have that to face too. They know it's a maintenance thing. But once you have a big, clear cut, if you monitor it and you follow up on the resprouts the past few, the years after that, if we all did that, we could kick this thing in 10 years or less, but it would take all of us. Because the one holdout, the birds are going to flock there and bring it right back over. So it's really an all hands on deck thing for the true solution, but every fewer buckthorn that's on the landscape, the better, right?
So Brett, do you have any other questions on the Facebook end?
We do, yes. Sarah from Facebook asks, do you endorse or recommend any companies for private landowners to eradicate buckthorn on their property?
Being a government agency, we can't recommend one firm over another, but certainly if you email us at the Healthy Hedges, I could provide you a whole list of companies that we have worked with or that I'm aware of that do this type of work in our area. Again, I don't recommend any one over another because there's a lot of good companies out there that are doing this work.
And depending on the municipality, sometimes there are certified lists and lists that have to be used with HOAs as well. So another reason we can't endorse fully, it really depends on where you are. But we're working with lots of landscapers too, with the Chicago Region Trees Initiative, or CRTI. I know they're working very closely with the associations of all the landscaping companies. So in addition to outreach like this, where we speak directly to public and landowners and neighbors of the preserves, regional partnerships like Matt working with Morton Arboretum and CRTI are getting out there for those other spots we know are an issue too. And we've heard direct from both, from landscaping companies and from homeowners, that it's really not an offered or provided service unless you ask for it. And so we're really trying to get the materials and knowledge in the hands of these landscaping companies so that hopefully one day it's offered as a service, just like cutting your lawn. And so we're working on those resources as well. So just, ask around locally. But like Matt said, try the email address, healthyhedges@lcfpd.org. And, we can share our, who we've teamed up with in the past for sure.
So we have a lot of folks asking about alternative methods for eradicating buckthorn if they cannot use herbicide. There's an attendee who mentioned that her town does not allow Roundup and she doesn't feel comfortable using herbicide. So she cut the stumps and used buckthorn baggies. Will this work instead of herbicide?
Yeah, I I've heard of the product. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of them. I have seen photos of how it works. Essentially, it's a thick black plastic bag that after you cut the buckthorn down, you would wrap this around the remaining stump that's there to prevent any sunlight from getting to that stump and to prevent any resprouting, because if there's any shoots that are coming off that stump, then there'd be kind of trapped in that bag and not get any sunlight. And over a period of time, that would eventually kill the stump and that plant. Again, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of it. It's really not feasible for us in the forest preserve, where we're trying to cut down hundreds or thousands of buckthorn plants in every year. We don't have the ability to put buckthorn baggies around each one. If it's a small landscape or a home and you have one or two, that might be a feasible option. But if you're dealing with a larger area, it's, in my opinion, is probably not a feasible solution. Also, you have to think about how much plastic you're putting out in that environment and what happens to it as it degrades, and making sure that you're picking it up when you're done with it and disposing of it properly, or reusing them if that's an option. I will say that if Roundup isn't an option for you, again, the Garlon or the products that have triclopyr in it are much more effective at treating and controlling buckthorn than Roundup. So I know you may not be comfortable with that, but that would be an option. Or again, looking at some of those ecological landscape contractors that are knowledgeable about these herbicides and can apply them for you.
Thanks for that information. We have a lot of other questions coming in regards to, let's see, herbicide, and also some different types of plants to plant in the place of buckthorn. Douglas is asking, he has a northern flatwoods backyard and he's looking for some recommendations for healthy hedge replacements.
Well, those northern flatwoods are very unique, and be very honored to have that in your yard. I know not everybody might share that same view, but really that's something that's unique to Lake County. There's northern flatwoods communities scattered throughout the state, but really there's more flatwoods in Lake County than probably the rest of the state combined. For those who don't know, these are very shallow areas that are inundated in the early spring, and are really home to a lot of salamanders and frogs and toads that breed in these ponds in the spring when they fill up with water. So I know some of that flooding or that seasonal inundation is an issue for trying to establish plants, but there are some good options that are native to those areas that do quite well. The larger, if you're looking for a larger tree, swamp white oak is the common tree of northern flatwoods. Also, if you're looking for smaller shrubs, if it's depending on how wet it is, there's buttonbush, winterberry, which is ilex, which is at this time of year has those bright red berries, and those persist out through the spring. So in terms of a home landscape, that would be very desirable and very attractive, in my opinion. Lots of other plants like wild currant, which are also edible, produce these tubular yellow flowers and those dark purple black fruits in the fall this time of year. It's just very attractive. There's lots of options, and I would encourage you to visit some of the sites in our Southern Des Plaines region, Wright Woods, or Captain Daniel Wright Woods, MacArthur Woods. Taking a walk on those trails and seeing what plants are there could give you some options, or contact us again with the Healthy Hedges. Do you have any other options, Allison?
No, that's a good example. I mean, a number of them. If you're looking for smaller stuff, yeah, I don't know how much water it stands during the year, or how much of that you're dealing with, but it can be good to put a mix of sedges and forbs in that are good in lower wet areas to help control that. It's going to bring in pollinators as well and help just with a bit of possible backyard flood mitigation.
So I see that we're almost at the hour. We've had a lot of great questions. I wanted to check in again with Brett on our Facebook side before we sign off tonight. Brett, do you have any more questions?
Yes, we do have one more. Lou from Facebook asks, can you review girdling, whether or how to girdle buckthorn?
Girdling is a type of strategy where you're killing the plant without removing it or cutting it completely down. As I mentioned, that outer cambium layer, that outer layer of bark is the live portion of the tree, and that's where the nutrients and things are translocated from the tree, from the upper parts of the tree down to the roots. So if you can cut that layer around the tree, leaving the center part of the tree intact, it can kill the plant over time. So that's essentially what we call girdling. Unfortunately, some plants are very persistent and very aggressive, and will start to heal themselves and can actually heal over that cut if it's not too wide, or you're not herbiciding it after that. So we do girdling very infrequently, just because of the hazards of leaving trees on the landscape that are close to trails. But interior preserves, we are using that on larger trees here and there. But again, anything that we're girdling, we're also still applying herbicide to, just to make sure that the plant is truly dead.
Yeah, because especially with buckthorn and all those multiple stumps, it's not your average girdle, especially if it's one with 5 to 7 stems coming out. So I've seen it lots of times where it's a dead tree otherwise, but just an offshoot from the side of the stem at the ground level is just still a new buckthorn. So the roots are alive and other stems down low are alive. So it won't always work.
The trees really need to be about maybe a foot in diameter to really be effective for that. Because if you're just using a hand saw or something, that it's making a very narrow cut in that, and the trees will be able to heal over that pretty quickly. If you're using a chainsaw, then you're going to again want a larger tree, or to try that girdling strategy on, just because if it's much smaller than that, you're going to be cutting down the whole thing by just attempting to girdle it anyway.
So we are approaching the 8 o'clock mark. Matt or Allison, is there anything else you wanted to mention before we close our program tonight?
Well, I think we plugged the tomorrow being the last day for the October tree and shrub sale. So if we have inspired you this evening, I would encourage you to take the plunge and see what's left in our list. And if you miss it because it's just too last minutes, then do watch for the native plant sale in the spring. I see a number of other questions here that we didn't get to. So we do this throughout the fall. So watch for upcoming programs. I'm sure, Anissa, you'll cover that. But also in Horizons, we have a buckthorn article coming forth. So if you do not have our quarterly newsletter, you can get tips and tricks in there as well. And then Anissa, have you put in the chat yet the kind of our resources hub for Buckthorn Central? We have how-to tips and the how to cut it down, and then Matt and Brett did how to plant a tree. That's forthcoming soon. So we have a really great web page where lots of this information is there, and if it's not there, it will connect you with us also.
So I posted it earlier. I just posted it again. It's the lcfpd.org/buckthorn. Can't miss that address. So thank you both for joining us tonight. We're going to just say a few words about some upcoming programs, which Allison, thank you for already plugging some of those. I'm going to share my screen here so you can see. Here we go. All right, so if you enjoyed tonight and you want to learn more about what the Forest Preserve has to offer, as Allison mentioned, please sign up for Horizons magazine. That can either be delivered to your home, or you can get digital copies as well. In addition, we have some other great ways to learn about what's going on in the Forest Preserve District. Some lesser known ways are the Lake County Nature blog. So if you enjoy reading snippets of nature notes, this is the place for you to visit. As well as if you'd rather hear your nature notes for the day, Words of the Woods. This is moderated by Mr. Brett Pito, who's on our call tonight. So make sure you check that out as well. And of course, we want to mention that we're excited. Our Dunn Museum has reopened. If you are interested in taking a look at what it has to offer, you can purchase timed tickets to make sure that you can get in there when you'd like to. Also, we did put in the Healthy Hedges, or the Buckthorn, excuse me, the Buckthorn webpage address. But we also do have an Ask an Educator email. So if we did not get to one of your questions tonight, please feel free to email Matt and Allison, or you can also email us at askaneducator@lcfpd.org. And that can be any question you may have about the forest preserves or about nature happenings. We also do have a great lineup of upcoming virtual programs. You can check these all out on our website at lcfpd.org, but you'll see that we have a wide array of virtual programs for all ages and adults and families with children. And even though we won't see you in person, this is a great way to connect to some places that you might not have visited. And of course, next Ask an Educator Live is Play in the Preserves. And that's going to be Wednesday, October 14th at 7 p.m. And environmental educator Jan Ward and landscape architect Michael Haug are going to be joining us to talk a little bit about how to explore the forest preserves and the designs behind how they are in regards to play. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. I think we are going to be wrapping up. And so we hope to see you again in 2 weeks for our next Ask an Educator Live. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you again, Matt and Allison.